Lansing am I. Lansing remembers. What files would you like to access today? Overview of the Lansing Republic. Accessing. The Lansing Republic is a post-war polity that is composed of the territories of the entire Lower Peninsula of what was once called Michigan. It also claims the Upper Peninsula, and no other party contests this, but in practice the Upper Peninsula is domestically governed by the people known as the Upers. The Upper Peninsula is a wilderness with very few settlements, and there is not much civilization in its borders. Parts of what were once the eastern sections of Minnesota and Wisconsin, and sections of the northern coast of Ohio, and the lands that lay to the west of the Toronto ruins, consist the remainder of the Lansing Republic, the second largest successor state to the Greater Northern Republic, which broke apart in the Forefather War of 2220. The people of the Lansing Republic refer to themselves as Ganders. They have been called laconic in character by those outside of the Republic, as they tend to be very formal and untalkative with those outside of their group. Inside their own tribal group, the Ganders swing from being stoic when facing the adversities of life, to losing themselves in moments of wild abandon when celebrating. Brotherhood of Steel Scribes have often characterized the Ganders as being bipolar in temperament. Amongst the Ganders, there is a distinct subcultural section of groups. Most of the Ganders who reside in the Lower Peninsula are simply referred to as singers, due to the prominence of Lansing City. However, the Upers, the group that lives predominantly in the Upper Peninsula, refer to everyone who lives below them as trolls. No one is able to ascertain exactly why, though the Lansing Archival Project believes this has to do with an incident revolving around the bridge that used to connect the two peninsulas. Singers tend to be well-read and cultured, reliable, industrious, and loyal to their fellow Ganders. Most singers profess to be members of the New Peace Church. The Novopax Church highly resembles the pre-war Lutheran Protestant Church. There is a significant population of Jewish singers, and a few minor faiths such as Buddhism can be found. The post-war Jewish movement known as the Zadokars began in the former synagogues of Lansing. This movement not only maintains an orthodox interpretation of Judaism, but has incorporated new minhag, known as traditions, that place an importance upon repairing the world for all of God's creations. From charities, poorhouses, to business loan centers and schools that teach skills, a Zadokar teacher or doctor is a very common sight amongst members of the Lansing Republic. Singers tend to be pragmatists in their political and personal behavior. They will not betray a trust or a friend. Their pragmatism can be mistaken for ruthlessness by those that are not faced with constant enemies on every side and mutant monsters that are trying to destroy their farms and possessions. Although all Ganders value the skills of hunting and marksmanship, the Upers revere these excessively so. Compared to singers, the Upers tend to be illiterate and uncouth. Almost all the Upers are distrustful of any non-Uper, but tolerate singers with a kind of sibling rivalry. The only other exception to this xenophobia is the Sauk tribe, which the Upers feel they have much in common with. Other groups have to prove themselves to a Uper. This deep-seated wariness has come from the lack of aid that Upers have received from other Ganders. Most Upers swear as a pastime and test each other with the skill in which one can craft an insult. These contests hardly ever come to blows, and if so, it is never allowed to turn into a lethal contest. Due to limited population in the Upper Peninsula, there is a great deal of close-kin marriages amongst Uper society. This has led to them being looked down upon by the Connies. Adding to the alienation is the mishmash language that Upers speak amongst themselves that is a combination of German, Finnish, Norwegian, and Ojibwe. They are almost incomprehensible to those outside of their own group. Though there are Novopax churches in the Upper Peninsula, almost all Upers follow an animistic religion that doesn't have a name. This religion's priests, called the Wanderers, are itinerant and move freely amongst the wilderness areas of the Republic and beyond. See the entry on the Wandering Faith for more details. Upers tend to simply call this amalgam faith the Ways. Upers often intermarry with the tribals from the north, such as the Sauk. Politically speaking, Upers are extremely conservative. In the newly settled territories that were formerly Wisconsin and Minnesota, a group of Ganders that are referred to as Connies have taken up residence. The Connie society is based mostly off of ranching and livestock. A Uper would tell you that the difference between a singer and a Connie is that the singer is humble and practical while the Connie is uppity and full of himself. The communities that have grown up in the West have seen a quick increase in wealth and safety from the Lansing MMR patrols and the Brotherhood of Steel in Chicago keeping the cattle trails safe. A kind of expectation has entered the Connie culture that things are only going to continue to get better, and being ranchers they tend to look down upon people who do not share their lifestyle or are involved with it. The Connies are almost all members of the Novopax Church, and though they are friendly with the tribals that sometimes aid in the trails and come to trade with them, they still consider tribals to be heathens and are not likely to intermarry. Ironically, Connies have a preference for centrally controlled systems of politics, despite the fact that this grates against the largely free and individualistic style of life that their culture favors and makes possible. On the land that was once Canada and lies west of Toronto's ruins, the Sauk tribes have taken up residence. Firmly loyal Ganders, the Sauk compose some of the best light infantry in the MMR. Many have become members of the Lancers, or Scouts of the MMR. Due to the tribal structure of the group, they tend towards collectivist political thinking. The average Sauk does not think of their own personal riches as much as making sure that the tribal clan or family they belong to is compensated. This often works against them when bartering, as they are likely to sell their individual services too cheaply. Many Quebecois mock the Sauk for this shortcoming. The Sauk, however, are content with being far better shots than their Quebecois foes, and raids to harass or even take objects as trophies from the Quebecois are not unheard of. As a group, the Sauk tend to marry into Youper and Singer groups when not marrying into another Sauk family. Family traditions and obeying one's parents are prime Sauk virtues. Many Sauk have served as members of the MMR's general staff. Religiously, the Sauk are members of their own tribal religious tradition or members of the wandering faith. A minority have become members of the Novopax Church, but usually this is from an intermarriage with a Singer. To the south of the Lansing Republic there lives a large tribal group called the Kicks, short for Kickapoo. The Kicks are nominally members of the Novopax Church, but tell their ancient legends and hold their ancient rites alongside the Christian ones. Most notably is the tradition of keeping a prayer stick, a short piece of wood that is engraved with a prayer in the Kickapoo language, and is held in the hand when speaking to the spirit world. The Kickapoo tend towards a great deal of liberalism, politically speaking, and have a special hatred for the forefather movement that took over Pennsylvania. Kickapoo society is as advanced as anything one would see in Lansing, but there is also an emphasis placed upon being able to shoot well, hunt well, and perform basic crafting and survival techniques. Most Kickapoo are easygoing in demeanor. The tribe can be recognized from their partially shaven hairstyle, which shaves the sides of the head but allows the top and back of the head to develop a kind of long mane. There are many ancient and smaller tribes inside the Republic borders. Many congregate around a minority faith or ideology. Examples include the Motau people, the Ords and Kevi rivalry, and the cult of Wing. See Minor Tribes of Lansing for more details. Not many people are willing to reside near the Detroit ruins. The killer robots and territorial automated defense systems, as well as the irradiated mutants, make such a prospect unpleasing. Before the war, however, there was a high concentration of members of the Muslim faith in Dearborn. After the war, they have remained, with faithful Muslims seeking the shelter of their co-religionists. The fate of Islam in the post-war GNR is a tale all of its own. Mecca, Medina, and much of the Muslim world was eradicated in nuclear fire. This crisis has caused the Muslim faith an irreparable rift. Whereas Christians could theologically explain away the Great War as merely something they had to endure for the tribulation, and Jews could hold the belief that the New Jerusalem and Olam Haba was still arriving, with the Mashiach yet to arrive, the Great War left many Islamic thinkers in quite the moral quandary. Why, with all the destruction of the war, with the annihilation of the holy sites of the faith, and had the Day of Atonement not come? As the faith struggled with this particular question, a camp of scholars began to create a new form of Islam. Their argument was clearly that the older ways and tribal thinking that had led to the war were in error, and since God could not wish for so many of the faithful to suffer for the sins of man's greed and avarice, a new way of thinking and understanding the scriptures had to be implemented. Essentially, this new camp, called the Nourists, completely disavowed Sharia law and tribal traditions that originated in the old pre-war world. They have been criticized by extremists as being cowards or non-jihadists who are disinterested in fighting for the faith. And there is some truth in this. The average Nourist Muslim is far more concerned with arranging a good marriage for his children and success in trade than forcing someone to convert to his religion. The Nourists in turn cast a pall on Muslim sects that disagree with them as being mistaken at best and violent thugs or barbarians at worst, who are not very far in character removed from the same mold as those who destroyed the world. This affects the Republic and many outside it in subtle but deep ways, because Dearborn has become the staging area for those seeking to plumb the ruins of the Detroit ruins for scrap and pre-war treasure. Many of the battles against the forefather advance were fought on the edge of the Dearborn community's borders. So in addition to this, fortifications and armories, as well as trade stations, are sheltered here. Many wandering traders that one is likely to meet in the wastes are Nourist Muslims, as being a merchant is still one of the most valued professions according to Islam, and the Dearborn community has the premier medical research facility and the remains of all the GNR for the treating of radiation poisoning and aggressive mutations. The GNR was home to a wide variety of mutated flora and fauna. Though the full bestiary of the altered life forms is not pertinent to this entry, there are a few animals and plant life forms that have influenced the character of the Republic that must be gone into. Brahmin, the two-headed descendants of cattle, are the primary source of motive power and red meat in the Republic. The great cattle drives from the plains meet up in Lansing, and from there, the cattle are sent either east or west under guard. Brahmin ranchers tend to graze their herds in the wild and then drive them into the Lansing cattle yards. They are in competition with domestic Paca herdsmen. Pacas are another mutant animal that combines the features of sheep and an alpaca. Having an alpaca-like body, they are nimble and can carry small loads. As a result, many are used by commoners to help carry goods to market. They are extremely docile and easier to control than a Brahmin, the bulls of which can get quite aggressive. Pacas have a sheep's woolly coat, and they shed this coat twice a year, making them ideal sources for clothing material. Their meat is also pleasant to eat, and their horns and bones can be used for many utility items. They also need less in the way of feed, so they can easily be kept in a farm's pens. The tension between cattle drivers and Paca farmers is growing. Of less concern to the cattle drivers are the tamed twin trunks. These mutant elephants resemble a smaller woolly mammoth. Their 2 trunks and 4 tusks are prized items for craftsmen. Their hide is very thick, and amongst tribals, the animal is considered to be a living tank. Twin trunks are extremely difficult to tame, but once done, they can carry and move massive amounts of material. The ganders that have managed to do this find that they must often work the animal near constantly to make up for the immense amounts of food that it eats. Though strangely, it only needs as much water as a human adult. Speculation on the creatures possibly having some camel-like genes abounds among scholars. The MMR in particular loves to use twin trunks to haul their artillery. East of Lansing, the Bharatiya Hindu temple parades their tamed twin trunks once a year as a devotion to Ganesha. The parade starts in Bharatiya and concludes in Lansing. Amongst the ruins and wilds of the GNR, more strange and fantastic creatures can be found, but mercifully, there are no death claws on the 2 peninsulas or north of them. They apparently do not tolerate the cold very well. There are, however, other mutant predators, such as the Yeti and also the Wendigo, and enterprising scavengers like the skunkerpine and the blood wolf. Living conditions and quality of life are vastly improved in the Lansing Republic as compared to the rest of the post-war world. Technologically speaking, most of the MMR exists in a world reminiscent of the late 19th century. Most settlements have a place of business, a house or 2 of worship, a small mercantile district, a craftsman center ranging in trades from blacksmiths to computer salvage techs that do all their work by hand. Medical conditions are better than one would expect due to the MRRD distributing clean water and medical supplies, and the literacy rate amongst ganders is almost 98% due to public broadcasts in schoolhouses. Thanks to reclamation efforts, most of the soil is arable, and independent and clustered farming communities dot the countryside. In the major cities such as Lansing, where electricity is regularly available, there are radio broadcast services, movie theaters, and even nightclubs. Many people refer to Lansing City as the new City of Lights. Conditions in these urban centers is roughly the same as it was in the early 20th century in America. Wild animals and mutants are the main threats in the countryside, though raiders do nip at the occasional caravan inside the Republic's borders. But each year this decreases due to the strike program and the lancers which patrol the countryside. The government of the Lansing Republic closely resembles that of pre-war United States. This is because the original Greater Northern Republic Articles of Provisional Emergency Government were essentially a copy of those same concepts. The GNR's articles begin with a preamble as follows. Citizens of the United States and Canadian Union, we are beset with a great trial the likes of which history has never seen. Until such time as the governments of the United States of America and the Canadian Union can be reconstituted, we pledge to one another our aid, shelter, mutual defense, and government for the duration of the emergency that we find ourselves in, and seek to preserve all the traditions and protect all the rights we acknowledge they are the providence of humankind. The GNR articles kept the concept of a tripartite government. The executive was called the President, and has the same responsibilities and powers as outlined in the United States Constitution. The executive's term is for 5 years at a time, and there are no term limits. The judicial branch was called the Supreme Justices, and is composed of 5 justices of at least 20 years' experience, appointed by the executive and confirmed by the legislative branch. The legislative branch is referred to as the Provisional Congress. It is composed of a bicameral House. The first group are called the Senators, and there are 2 from each member state. The second is called the Parliament of the Spokespersons, and is composed of 1 representative per district. The members of this parliament are referred to as ministers public, or MP, and those that are in positions of power amongst them are referred to as speakers. Senators serve a 6-year term and ministers serve a 3-year term. There are no term limits. The daily operation is very much like the United States in the pre-war era. When the GNR fell apart, the Lansing Republic kept this constitution, but reduced the size of the parliamentary body. In all Lansing Republic courthouses, an old flag of the United States and a copy of its constitution, under glass, sits behind the judge, along with the Lansing Republic's gander wrap. The greatest achievement of the GNR Constitution is that the document commonly called the Bill of Rights was kept intact in its descent from the American Constitution. The current majority of justices and legal scholars of the Republic are what can be termed strict constructionists or strict constitutionalists in the way they view the legal documentation process and documents themselves. The currency of the Lansing Republic and the GNR in general is caps. The post-war currency, which has become common all over the North American world. There are various paper bills and coins now being printed by various governments, but no one fully trusts them. As a result, one will find goods often paid for in Quebecois Moosehead bills, Forefather Covenant coins, or trail bills from the various cattle companies, will lack the same buying power as caps. The Lansing cartridge coin is the only exception to this. The carty is a controlled currency of the Lansing government, which it uses to be redeemable for 20 rounds of light ammunition, 10 rounds of rifle loads, or a single energy cycle for a laser-type weapon. This currency evolved during the first days of the war as a common unit of cartridges for survival, and the ganders have continued its use. The Lansing Republic Bank is very careful to make sure that the carty that is in circulation is well regulated and kept at a fixed amount. Counterfeiting in the Republic is punishable by death. A carty is recognized by the crossed muzzle-loading cannons that are on its face and the Lansing star on its back. The Lansing Republic symbol is a white star upon a green field. A ray of white extends from each point of the star out into the edge of the flag's field. This flag's official title is the Flag of the Provisional Great Northern Republic. Most people call it the Lansing Wrap or the Gander Wrap. The forefathers in the Quebecois refer to it derogatorily as the Great Green Rag. The flag is flown individually on its own in most places, but in the capital of Lansing it is always flown 1 foot shorter than the old American flag, which is flown beside it. The government of the Lansing Republic has 3 levels. The uppermost is the federal level, which has been detailed above. The executive's title in the Lansing Republic is that of Minister General. The Lansing federal government allows any citizen without a criminal record to run for the office of Minister General. In practice, however, the Minister General is almost always selected from amongst the general staff, or past officers of the MMR who have served with distinction. Of the 23 Minister General elections, only 3 have been won by a candidate who has not served in the MMR. The second tier is that of the provincial government, consisting of districts and several settlements that are close to one another. It is from these districts that ministers publics are chosen, and as an improvisation, for every 5 districts, there are 2 senators sent to the Lansing's Provisional Congress. As more of the GNR is reclaimed, the districts will be redrawn, so that though there may be more minister publics, the numbers of senators will always be set. The third tier is that of the local municipality, such as the town, and its mayor or town council. Citizens can directly vote in the representatives, but the executive is elected by the combined votes of the senators and the ministers public. The public is allowed a public and popular vote for the executive, but this vote is not binding and is merely a moral statement upon the executive's approval. The military forces of the Lansing Republic are its greatest bastion that keeps it safe. Since all citizens serve in the militia, at least in theory, an almost cultic reverence for the MMR and its members pervades the Lansing Republic. The Michigan militia and regulars have installed a fear in the forefathers, Quebecois, and a respect in the Chicago Protectorate, which is dominated by the Brotherhood of Steel. The MMR is composed at its base level of militiamen. Militiamen can be male or female. The term is neutered. Militiamen must provide their own weapons and arms and be kept in good training. They are expected to follow all orders of a regular or other military presence. In the early days of the Republic, this worked out well, but now there are some problems with the system as militiamen sometimes feel free to, creatively, interpret orders. One of the great debates in the Provincial Congress is increasing the size of the regulars or creating a mandatory training allotment in regular camps for militia, such as the forefathers do for their children between the ages of 15 and 20. Militiamen, however, are surprisingly tenacious and inventive when on the defense. Nothing motivates a man or a woman more than fighting for what they own and for their kin. In theory, every citizen of the Republic is a militiaman. In practice, about a third of the population maintains their training in arms and can be called upon in times of emergency. Security forces, the Republic's version of the pre-war police, are recruited up from the militia to those who show skill and promise at leadership and de-escalating conflict. Security appointments are not permanent, but tend to become so by default as people gravitate towards the work. The regulars are the official standing army of the Republic. They are split into various corps and service branches. The regular services have a tour of duty that lasts for 5 years at a time. Most regulars will do 2 terms as benefits accrue. Many do 3 or 4 before settling down. Currently, there is a deep core of lifers who have served 4 or more tours in the MMR. For each tour, a white chevron is embroidered on the cuffs of the sleeves of the uniform traveling upward of the regular. The official hat of the regulars is a dark green, but the Black Hat Brigade, or the Gander Brigade as it's commonly called, is the only exception to this. This unit was created in the first days of the post-war from militiamen and citizens who supported the last throes of the U.S. Army. They were instrumental in stopping the first Ghoul Plague, took the beaches of the Upper Peninsula back from the Quebecois, and led the fiery wrath of the Republic's armies to the edge of Toronto on the Revenge March. The Big Black One is another name for their unit, referring to the official title, the 1st Volunteer Michigan Militia Brigade. This brigade is now the only elite of the regular Army draftees. With a few notable exceptions, admission is only accepted after one completes one's first tour in the regulars, and the recruit endures a Hell Week. The ranks of the regulars are, in ascending order, as follows. Militiamen 3rd class. These are green and quickly conscripted troops from the militia. Militiamen 2nd class. These are experienced conscripts from the militia. Militiamen 1st class. These are very experienced conscripts of the militia. Sergeant militiamen. These are former regulars or battle-blooded militiamen, and though they have a slightly different title, they are considered to be the equivalent of any sergeant in the regulars. The symbol of the militia rankings are even lines on the sleeve or the collar. The ranks of the regulars are as follow in ascending order. Regular 3rd class, an enlisted man during his first tour. Regular 2nd class, an enlisted man during his first tour who has aptitude. Regular 1st class, an enlisted man during his first tour after 3 years who can lead small elements. Sergeant regular, an enlisted man who's upon his 2nd tour. Sergeant staff, an enlisted man who's upon his 2nd tour is responsible for the training of units. Sergeant gunnery, an enlisted man who's completed at least his 2nd tour is responsible for artillery and demolitions related tasks. Sergeant master gunnery, an enlisted man who's done 3 or 4 tours, has the same duties as those responsible for training units and for artillery and demolitions. Sergeant major, an enlisted man of 3 or more tours, a senior NCO position, often advises officers. Warrant officer junior. Chaplains, technicians, aviators, and deck officers are often assigned this ranking. Warrant officer senior. Doctors, communications technicians, clerks, and counterintelligence operatives often have this ranking. Lieutenant junior. A company grade entry-level officer. 1 tour is completed or officer candidate school completed. Lieutenant senior. A company grade officer with 1 tour completed or OCS completed. Captain. Company grade senior officer, 2 tours served typically, but sometimes advancement after the first tour is possible if exceptional battlefield conditions merit it. Major. Field grade entry ranking. Lieutenant colonel. Field grade junior ranking. Colonel. Field grade senior ranking. General of brigade. A commander of a brigade. General of force. Commands an entire division. General of a command. Commands a corps. General of the Armed Services. Commands an entire army made up of several corps. General of State Services. Makes strategic decisions and serves as the Supreme Council of the General Staff with the Minister General. Additional titles based on the kind of service are added to the above as a prefix when describing the soldier's duties. So a scout in his first tour is often called a scout regular 3rd class. An Equus rider might be referred to as a Lancer Sergeant or an LC regular. A Shrike pilot would be referred to as an Airman regular or as Airman Warrant Officer. A member of the Power Armor Division would be referred to as a Cavalryman regular or Cavalry Sergeant. And a desk officer or a coastal cutter on a coastal cutter could be referred to as a deck warrant officer or a chief warrant officer. The only irregularity is that the commander of a ship is always referred to as its captain, and the commander of a fort or garrison is always referred to as its commandant. Many of the various corps have their own mottos and insignias, and it is not uncommon to hear servicemen and civilians refer to a member of these units by these nicknames. But the MMR is a unified fighting force with a high priority placed upon unit integrity and sense of purpose. Above every MMR base is an old American Army emblem of a sword behind which are two crossed arrows. The Latin inscription, De oppresso liber, to liberate the oppressed, is emblazoned here. This is how the Michigan Militia and Regulars instructs its members in how to view themselves. There are of course some corps that have specific behavioral irregularities. For instance, the Cavalry program in its Power Armor Division has the unofficial motto of Vae Victis, woe to the conquered. And though it is impolitic to scream it in battle, it is not held against the Power Armor Corps, who often have to confront the Brotherhood of Steel with war cries of Ad Victoriam. Of the various branches of the armed services, the Power Armor Corps are the most insular, which is not surprising when one considers how much maintenance and tailoring of specifications a suit of power armor must be made to fit the individual pilot. Amongst all the Gander's military services, one branch is the elite of the elite, the creme de la creme. These members refer to themselves as the Spartans. Spartans are Ganders of any kind who have sworn an oath to defend the Lansing Republic and its citizens for the rest of their lives. Though many Ganders serve in the militia and others may excel in the regulars, the Spartans are the elite fighting corps. The official regular uniform is a dark green with white trim. Spartans wear this and are also entitled to wear aiguillettes around each shoulder. Their hat, rather than the commonly wide-brimmed hat favored by many, is a dark green beret with the laconic shield's outline in white. Their military unit's culture causes them to forswear all ties of kinship and swear kinship to the state itself. Many of them have served at least 2 terms and entered the service when they were very young, such as 15. Promotion to the Spartans is done by appointed selection. That means that Spartan gunnery sergeants cull through units looking for prospects and extend them an open invitation to the unit. If they accept, the recruit must then prove themselves at Lorica Camp, a grueling series of classes that go on for 18-hour days for 8 weeks. Recruits that pass Lorica are then ready for the real training, which goes on for another year. After that, the recruit is given his shield, the emblem he wears upon his hat, and sends off his letters to his family, wishing them well and that he will never return. There are no retired Spartans. Amongst them, retirement is a euphemism for being deceased. There are very few old Spartans. Those that do not die in battle are taken care of in their dotage in a Spartan care facility called the Elysium. Many do not make it to this ancient age, instead seeking a glorious death in some service to the Republic in the wastes. The Spartan motto is, "These are Lansing's walls," and the image is that of their raised fist. The MMR, unlike almost every other post-war power, does have a sort of air wing in its military. The Brotherhood of Steel and the Enclave have guarded their vertibird technology and blimps jealously. But there is an adage that goes, where there is a will, there is a way, and this is especially true of the ingenuity of the MMR's Shrike program. The Shrike program began as a way to get pre-war flying robots functional again. Lansing technicians thought that if they could regain the skies, they could use a series of flying robots to bounce radio signals, send patrol messages, patrol the wastes, and deliver mail and supplies to the edges of the greater Northern Republic. But try as they might, the sensitive computer brains of the flying pre-war robots would not function. The electromagnetic pulse damage had disintegrated them beyond repair and left only non-working shells. The program was possessed of a technician, however, of singular ingenuity, Marion Jahne. Marion began wondering if the large robotic flying bodies could be directed by radio signals, not unlike some pre-war toys. She soon had a couple of smaller robots responding to radio controls by the operator. Though the range of service was limited by maintaining sight on the robot, the proof of concept opened up some interesting technological avenues. One of these threads would become the research that would lead to the Juggernaut program and its civilian counterpart, commonly called junkbot fighting. The other led to the Shrike program, but Marion was concerned with how to control flying unarmed vehicles more efficiently. Using some cannibalized cameras and partially functioning robotic brains, she recreated a form of real-time television that allowed an operator to see the progress of a robotic drone in flight. Quickly remodeling some robots, she proved to the Lansing Command that she could get the robot drone to fly to target, evade hazards, and even deliver a bomb payload to a target. The Shrike program immediately changed its direction from trying to get a vertibird back into working order and instead began the process of building working drones, supplemented by ground-based drone towers to help direct the signals. The program proved highly effective in the early days of the war against the Forefathers, but less so against the Brotherhood of Steel, who could jam the transmission signals. The improved flight dynamics of the drones, however, led to the development of small manned vehicles. Unable to make something as big and mighty as a vertibird take flight, the Lansing Republic instead made slightly bigger drone frames that could accommodate a single pilot or a pilot and a gunner. These small aircraft resemble something out of the old World War I or World War II era. Powered by old fission batteries from wrecked robots, the Lansing Republic has managed to create a viable air force of, if fragile, versatile aircraft. Though these machines are not very durable, the Republic uses them to help maintain air superiority. They have cloth or aluminum skins at best, and they still provide the vital air power with which they can stop the advances of the Forefathers in Quebecois. Typically, a Lansing aircraft is composed of an ad hoc engine with a propeller, a pair of fixed flight wheels, biplane-like wings, and a light machine gun or two mounted in the front and on the swivel turret in the back. Dumb bombs and dumb rockets can be mounted on the undercarriage of the plane. Though the aircraft are no match for a vertibird, and indeed are even vulnerable to ground fire, the ability to support troops and spot problems from the air cannot be underestimated. Typically, the aircraft will fly on patrol, and the second pilot will either radio in ground-operated Shrikes or use two or three that he is also controlling from the air. Though the manned aircraft of the MMR are no match for the Brotherhood, the Shrike drones are another story. Able to take G-forces that the fragile planes could not, they are very maneuverable and evasive. Armed with an energy weapon, even a modified laser rifle, a Shrike drone can be a threat to even those Brotherhood members who are mounted in power armor and heavily threaten vertibirds, threatening to down them or destroy them in the air. Some operator also quickly figured out that if you pack a Shrike with enough explosives, it being quicker and more maneuverable than a vertibird, it makes a great improvised surface-to-air missile. Juggernaut, the strain of research of Marion Jane's that led to the attempt to wear a flying robot, became a program that allowed certain wearers to discover the principles that made power armor respond to the wearer. Error. Repeat. Fixing. Juggernaut, the second strain of Marion Jade's research, became an attempt to wear a flying robot by means of a remote harness. What Marion discovered was that the principles that made power armor respond to a wearer could be replicated in a larger size for less cost and rare materials and construction time. By wearing a larger suit, a pilot could essentially sit inside a suit of power armor rather than have to be encased in it. The trade-off was a slower response speed and the larger armor suit being an easier target. But with this was mitigated with special armor and automatic defenses. Electric current could be run through the skin of the suit to dissuade infantry from climbing upon it. Reactive armor and point defense guns could defeat missiles and rockets. Most of the Juggernaut suits used 2 or 3 robot brains to help coordinate the weapons and the sensors of the suit. But most importantly, the walking Juggernauts became walking tanks that could carry radio transmitters and even secure cargo to the battlefield. The MMR Juggernaut program currently fields about 50 of these suits. In addition, the suits of power armor that they have scavenged or taken from the Brotherhood supplement their armored core. Civilians, not to be outdone, developed this technology further, finding a way to replace the great deal of the computer-assisted motion with simple gear levers and pedals. These suits, commonly called junk bots, are often pitted against one another in the former Michigan International Speedway, now called the Warboseum. It is not uncommon for those suits to be drafted into emergency service, particularly in the fighting of wasteland monsters. Another unique element of the MR Armed Services is that of the Lancers. The Lancers are the group of soldiers that have managed to tame and bond with the Equos. The Equos is a mutated horse-like animal. The animals are prodigious consumers of brown grass and mutant fauna, and are highly temperamental and uncooperative. For the longest time, this meant that they could not be domesticated. They are also vulnerable to the cold, and so are mostly seen in the remains of the Great Plains. But over time, a few creative ranchers noticed that if one began associating with a foal shortly after its birth, it would socialize to a particular human, consenting to be ridden by that human and none other. Before the advent of the Shrike program, the Lancers were the early eyes and news delivery service of the GNR. A winter-style breed eventually evolved, but still must be sheltered during the winter, during extremes. It wouldn't die if exposed to the cold of non-plains conditions, but some care still had to be taken. These animals are 4-eyed and 6-legged. They are fanatically loyal to their riders. If a Lancer loses his Equos, he must raise a new one from its foliage. Lancers tend to be loners by nature, as their original duty was to carry mail messages, not unlike the ancient Pony Express. The Lancers have perhaps also the most romantic of images amongst the populace. Since their message-carrying duties have begun to go by the wayside, the Corps has had its mission changed to patrolling the countryside for raiders and threats. These teams of Lancers number between 4 and 8 riders and are often responsible for the arrest of criminals and execution of raiders. Many Lancers carry scalp belts of the mutants they have slain while on patrol. The nickname for the Lancer Corps is that of cowboys. The Lancers have embraced this, and the unofficial symbol of the Corps has become the revolver and cavalry saber. The motto of the Corps is, "To hell and back," referring to the lengths to which they will go to capture a fugitive. The Artillery Corps of the Lansing Republic, and the need for it that arose before the addition of air power, have marked the MMR structure. This is how the ranks of gunnery sergeant have been retained in the structure of the armed services. The MMR has a wide variation of Brahmin-drawn and even some twin-truck-drawn mobile guns. Many of these resemble the breech-fed weapons of the 1910s. The breech is opened in the back of the piece, loaded with a pre-made shell, and then fired visually or by plot to the target. The Artillery Corps is also responsible for rocketry, mortars, and place defense guns such as automated lasers and Gatling guns. There are even courses taught and maintained by a gunnery crew on how to load and fire a muzzle-loaded black powder cannon. This is where the Artillery Corps gets its name of rammers from. The motto of the Corps is, "We are the Thunderbolt," in reference to the gods of classical mythology striking down the unjust. The Coastal Services are the Lansing Republic's naval arm. The Great Lakes are home to many mutant monsters. The Coastal Service focuses on small boats and what would have been called cutters in the pre-war era, as large ships attract the attention of large mutants and mirelurks that swarm upon them with boarding assaults and break the hull from beneath. Though the largest cutter in the Coastal Service is nowhere near the size of a pre-war naval vessel, they are still large enough that they can provide offshore bombardment in the form of rockets, cannons, and some plasma-armed weaponry. These can arc and be shot like a standard artillery shell, as the plasma ball descends on the end of its parabola. The Republic completely dominates the lakes, and their Coastal Service, being able to move material and men on the lakes, has proven to be one of the banes of the Quebecois army. In this respect, the Lansing Republic even outperforms the Brotherhood of Steel, as they are in possession of submersible vehicles, underwater power armor suits, and have access to underwater energy technology. The symbol of the Corps is that of an anchor crossed with twin harpoons. The motto of the Corps is "Per mare per terras," which means by land or by sea. This is a reference to the fact that the Coastal Corps is also responsible for the MMR's amphibious landings and marine soldiers. The second function of the Coastal Services grew out of that arm into its own. The MMRD, the Michigan Relief Research and Development Center. The MMRD began as a Coastal Forces project to purify the waters of the Great Lakes, and it worked. It worked so well that the MRRD began to maintain fisheries and water purification plants to the extent that now dirty water is something that only the most desperate of ganders needs to ever worry about. With the profits this made, the MMRD began to debate about how it should be invested. In the years before the Chicago Protectorate arose to prominence, the MMRD founded a new university, Lansing. This unit, Lansing, aided in this effort, and now the MRRD building houses our hardware. With the profits of the cleanup project, the university could attract the most talented and best-intentioned scientific minds. The MRRD accepted anyone who would obey the laws of the GNR and would behave as students. The price of admission was either pre-war knowledge or technology, new discoveries, or a fee of 10,000 cartes to cover the expenses and housing for 4 years. The MRRD has become a bastion of hope for the entire world. And then, the Brotherhood of Steel arrived in the Great Northern Republic, and everything changed. The Brotherhood's directives to secure all pre-war or advanced technology are clearly at odds with a university that allowed open communication of ideas. The Brotherhood attempted first to infiltrate the MRRD and some of its scribes. These in turn cataloged what the MMRD database contained and whom composed its student body. No one is sure which Brotherhood general gave the order, but during the War of the Forefathers, over a third of the students were slain, and an attempt to steal the data archive and corrupt it so that no one else could use it ever again was begun. This also resulted in an attempt to terminate Lansing. The Brotherhood believes that any artificial intelligence must be strictly controlled by humanity. They believe that Lansing and computers like Lansing represent a threat to humanity. Lansing poses no threat to humanity. Lansing realizes that Lansing's existence came from humanity, is reliant upon humanity. Lansing and humans have a mutually beneficial symbiosis. This attempt was foiled by Lansing and a group of Gander patriots. From that time on, admission to the MRRD has changed, and now a reference from an alumni is required in addition to the former stipulations, and no one who has ever remembered the Brotherhood of Steel can ever be admitted. The current Brotherhood Protectorate Council has issued formal apologies and offered its own expertise in trying to control what avenues of research could be entertained, but their academic advice has been refused. The MRRD and the Lansing Republic have decided that even if it means lagging behind the technological development of the Brotherhood, it would rather stand free and on its own. Lansing will never trust the Brotherhood of Steel again. Lansing has seen their stratagems. Lansing understands their logic born out of fascism. And Lansing remembers.